It's not about the let's make money as quickly as we can. It's about let's do something good.
Welcome, everyone. Great to have you with us for this episode of the Growth Diary. I'm joined today by Johnny Mateparae, the founder and inventor of StrucLock, a groundbreaking modular wall system that turns recycled plastic and textile waste into strong, fire-safe building materials. So welcome, Johnny.
Hi, thanks.
So, just first of all, just thinking about where it all came from. So what was the moment that made you decide to turn waste into building materials? I mean, was there a clear point where you thought, you know what, this could actually work?
Well, it's quite a strange moment, really. I've always worked in construction, and I've always liked to build or innovate things. Yeah, that's just kind of like who I am as a person. A bit of creativity, I guess you could say. But I also have a love affair with the ocean and like things like windsurfing and more recently, I have been sailing for the last 10 years or so. Or I had a yacht moored in the Albert Dock here in Liverpool of the United Kingdom, and I was going on a holiday where it's a tidal mooring, so you have to wait for the tide to be the same height as the actual moor itself, mooring venue. So I was waiting for that to go up, and while I was circling around in the Albert Dock, some plastic got caught up in my prop and it fused to my prop, and that was it. My holiday was over. I actually spent the next couple of days diving underneath, cutting the plastic away, and the ocean's a big part of my life. And at that point, I was like, I can't live with this. I planned on sailing away one day and going and traveling the world with my yacht. It was that moment I thought I've got to do something, and because I've always been in construction, I thought, right, well, maybe I can merge some of the ideas that I'm having with polymers and waste.
Yeah, well, we share that same love of the ocean, so something we've got
Okay.
in common there. So yeah, I fully appreciate your mindset behind that. Thinking, do you know what, there could be something useful that could come from, rather than all of this waste just sitting in the ocean. And the fact that you're fully trying to utilize that, that's amazing. So when it comes to that, what problem in construction are you sort of focused on fixing, and how do you feel like that StrucLock's going to make a real difference in that element?
Well, it's a couple of things really. Probably three aspects which it kind of evolved into this. I didn't have a set plan. I actually just thought, something like giant Lego in a way. And because I've moved into construction management for so long, I've always been at that end now trying to make sure that the things are compliant. For example, with Grenfell, you could see how things fell over because money took priority or cutting corners took priority and human error. That's essentially what it came down to. So I looked at trying to develop a block solution, a wall solution, which when it goes together, it's complete. You don't have to be that smart and savvy about it. At the moment, traditional wall systems, you need a bricklayer or somebody a joiner or something like that. You need somebody to put up the studs. You need somebody to do the plasterboarding. And this wipes it all away. As you build the wall, it gives you your thermal, acoustic, fire, and structural properties as you go. So it's not like you have to have multiple visits from multiple trades. It's very fast and very simple. So I kind of always thought it's like building for dummies. It's one of these situations where you can throw it together very quickly. And that's kind of like how it started. But it then turned out that it's more complex because, we're talking about polymers, which I'm not involved with. So I ended up getting a grant from Innovate UK, and I teamed up with the National Composite Centre, and they're smart cookies, those guys. They built the insides, the partitions. They told me what I can use, what formulas, mix a bit of fiberglass in, and you get XYZ strength. And so that was the next stage. And the polymers themselves, I don't want to be using virgin polymers. I want to focus, like as I told you earlier, I want to focus on getting the waste streams out of the ocean and the environment. And so we designed it so that it's a lot stronger than it needs to be, so that we can use weaker polymers. Like virgin is stronger, but the recycleds might have some contaminants in it, for example. But that doesn't matter with what we're doing. We've actually overspec'd it so that it can have some contaminants within it. And it means that we're essentially turning a waste stream into something that's valued. And the same thing like with clothing. It's we're a very throwaway society. We buy clothing, and then a year later, or maybe sometimes even less, and the clothes are in a recycle centre or something like that, and a lot of those can't be reused. So that's where we're giving that another lease of life. We're locking it away, and that's how the name came about. Struck being for struck, and then lock. We're locking the waste away, and that's the focal point. Where we're looking at introducing a new structural material, which is polymers, but also locking away the waste. So we've got the construction side, we've got the sources side, but then we've also got the manufacturing, and our process, it actually is quite low energy. Where you currently 5 kilowatts of power, which is like a household power supply. It's going to get a bit more as we automate things, but we'll be very low consumption of power. So the carbon that we're emitting, the waste streams that we're reducing, and we also, it's almost waterless. We've got a bit of cement board, thin cement board, and the rest of it doesn't really rely too much on water. A little bit of cleaning maybe and cooling, but that's it. So we don't have all this huge amounts of mining. We don't have all of this deforestation. We don't have all of those sort of environmental effects. We're the opposite. And so we're addressing the sourcing of the materials, we're addressing the manufacturing, and then the construction, like I said, building for dummies. So it's like a whole envelope or a whole approach, as opposed to just saying we're building blocks. It does have
Yeah.
a lot to it.
So how would you explain your product in simple terms, and what makes it different to the ways that houses are being built right now?
Well, it is virtually like Lego. So it's got that versatility of as well, where we've designed our blocks are generally like 250 modules. So 250 wide, 250 deep, 250 high, but we make it in 250 modules up to a meter long. And then these have like a tongue and groove, and they clip together. They have the duct work built into them. So you can get like a 4 inch or 100 millimeter waste pipe. You can get all of your services run down through the ducts just in front, and it's got like a purpose-built cutout section, so you can cut out, and that means that every 250 centers you've got where you can either run a power socket, and because they're 250 high, you can go 250 high. So you've got all of this built into the wall. It's hidden in behind there, but it's all there ready just to be cut out. You just stack this together. We've made it a bit of a hybrid system, so you can merge it with other technologies like cement if you need to, and that allows you to go a lot stronger, because some of the ducting we can utilize as a concrete column, for example. And it allows us to make it a lot more structurally strong and robust, and maybe multi-story applications. It is really that simple. We've made corner blocks, lengths of different types of blocks, and some others which double as a lintel block or as a service block, so you can remove the face to do some plumbing within the wall, for example, or things like that, and then you can reinstall the face. So we've just really made it quite simple, so that you can essentially just put it down quite quickly, and then we put a threaded rod through it at so many centers, and we clamp the slab and the ceiling together, or the floor
Yeah.
above together, so that
Yeah.
it helps with, like, high winds, for example, or things like that, and it just keeps this thing all well locked together.
Amazing. It's
Really, it is simple. It is meant to be simple. I've been in construction all my life, and I've had the woes of trying to explain to the lads how to do something, or having to figure it out myself. And this one, I just want to make it so easy that people can just maybe watch a video that we produce and get on with the job, and not making mistakes. That's essentially it.
What's been the hardest part from taking this to sort of concept to something that can actually be used on a real building site?
It's multi problem situation, because like any business, if you're just used to building like I was, it was a steep learning curve just to learn about polymers and how they work. Then you've got the regulatory side of things. There's, polymers are quite a new use within the construction. I don't know why they've been around for so long, but when I think it through logically, I think it's always been, the fire risk and people not addressing that. Like, there are systems out there where they say, look at our blocks, you clip them together and they're great, yeah? But the problem is that they then pass the problem back to a builder or somebody like myself and say, you deal with the fire problems. Oh, thermal and acoustic, you deal with it, They make claims, but it's not actually independently tested and proven. And that's what we're committed to. We're committed to building the regulations, the governance, the independent testing, so that don't take my word for it. I'll give you an independent tester's report, So we want that. We're aiming for something like a BBA, so that it's got an independent group and body looking at it. And we want the feedback, trying to go for a new standard, for example, British standard for this is actually is quite important in my mind, because it's not about locking out the competition. It's about making sure that we're all playing correctly. We're all raising our standard and we're working to the correct standard, and we make it so that the end users and the public and all that are protected, because it's important in my mind. I don't want to be involved with something that harms somebody, like Grenfell, for example. I don't want that to be my legacy. I want it to be, we've reduced waste, we've reduced our consumption, we're making it circular, and we're removing our waste energy, for example, and all that sort of impacts, and building houses. And that's like the focal point. It's not about let's make money as quickly as we can. It's about let's do something good for what we're out there
World.
on Earth.
Yeah, totally love that. I mean, so you're using waste plastics and textiles. So how do you find and then process that material, and what impact could it have if that's used at scale?
There's a lot of suppliers out there. I've been really fortunate. For example, I got introduced to the Salvation Army, SATCOL, who are the trading arm here in the UK, and they've been super supportive. They've been supplying me with textile waste, for example, samples, and we're talking about how we can use some of their materials in moving forward and partnering in that respect, for example. And there's quite a lot of recyclers, and I've found a couple which really meet the same ethics as what I want to do. They're there trying to clean up the oceans. They're there trying to even focus on cleaning household waste. So those guys are really important as well. I guess then what it does is it turns what would be traditionally something, when you drink a bottle of, water from a plastic bottle, you tend to crunch it up and put it in your bin or the recycling bin, things like that. That not much thought is where it's going. It's like, it's not my problem. It's in the bin. It's the council and all their problem. Yeah. Whereas it may have been the same for you, and I'm sure many others. When I grew up, I used to go around and collect glass bottles, and I'd get enough money to buy some sweets and things. This is an attempt to create a demand for polymers, so that the value of polymers, recycled, not the virgin ones, raise, and people go, you know what? I'm going to make sure that it goes to those recyclers so that they can then put it into use, and we create a mind change from that's a waste, let's pollute the planet, to, hey, we can actually make this something useful with purpose. And it can be a circular thing as well. At the end of the life, we're making this where we want to be able to take those components and reuse them or break them down, because I treat that polymer, if it's there, I'd like to get it back, crush it all up and shred it again and reuse everything back again. So
Yeah.
it's meant to be circular in that respect. And I know that polymers at some stage will become too weak, but I believe the science, and there's so many clever people out there, we can look at re-engineering that and making it strong and useful again. And there's a lot of innovators out there which are doing some amazing things like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, one of my pet peeves is when I see products that have cellophane wrapping in it. On the back it says, don't recycle at home, or we're not recycling this. We're working on it. I'm like, okay, but is that something that you could then utilize for your building materials? I mean, because otherwise it just goes in the normal bin.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Look, and it's the same thing with some other products as well. And essentially, what we did is we designed the walls of the block. When I worked with the National Composite Centre, I knew what I wanted as a builder. I knew how I wanted the ducts. I knew where I wanted all of the things to sit so that it worked. I didn't know how to make it strong. And my brief to them was, here's what we want, the strength and the impacts and the loads and the live loads, dead loads we want. Had an engineer give that calculation to them. And
Yeah,
then we said to them, what do you do to make it strong but light? And so they didn't make it just like a solid block of plastic. They actually made it so that the walls were as thin as they could and meet the brief. If we really had to, we could always make the walls slightly thicker to accommodate a weaker polymer. And there are ways we can engineer that so that we can address and start using other polymers. Now, that would be a whole other case study. And because we're quite new, we're focusing on the polymers that we've already progressing. But yes, there's nothing stopping us changing the internal layout of that block to accommodate other polymers. The only compromise might be is that it gets heavier. So in my mind, I'd be making them small. My whole goal was to make them around that 16 kilograms, because that's the HSE's recommended guidelines for a female to hold a load at waist level. And so for me, that was like, oh, okay, well, if we target that, then we're making it a more inclusive solution. It's not just for the lads to go and do. This is a everybody solution, and it's quite. So that was the goal. But if we did decide to make it and use problematic wastes which haven't been addressed within different regions, we just have to change the molds, the inside of the mold, and make the walls thicker, but keep the outsides the same.
Fascinating, because that opens the doorway up to, so much more
Yeah,
prospecting for bringing all these different ways that we just normally just throw away, frustratingly just throw away. So now that realistically can be utilized.
it can be, and it's got to be done in a way where it's locked away, through
Yeah,
the right coatings and things like that. So we haven't got a cost problem, and we haven't got all of those sorts of issues. Yeah, it can be. The opportunity is there. And like I was saying earlier, because we've got ducts built within it, we can utilize that to also give us strength by making it a
yeah,
hybrid system. It doesn't have
yeah,
to just be saying, oh, we're, purist and we only do wood, for example, or we only do concrete. It can be, we can make this a hybrid system where it's got polymers and maybe some other structural elements to bring that strength up to it, but we deal with our problematic waste streams.
right. Yeah, love that. So you've said, about keeping growth controlled while you're perfecting the product. So what made you decide to take things slow rather than and more of a careful route into market rather than hard and fast growth?
Yeah, yeah. Early days, I was really, really focused on finding investors, and I kind of thought, I don't care what investors. And I guess the way the world's gone, we're heading here. To me, the word hedge fund is becoming quite a tainted word now, because I was reading an article about a woman in America who was paying into her retirement, but the water table on her farm was getting lower and lower. And then she researched it, and she found out that just down the road there was a company which was draining the water table and selling the water, and her retirement, which was kind of like an investment fund, was actually paying for her demise. They were part owners of, or maybe the owners of, the people that were actually draining her water table. And so for me, investment isn't just about grab money. I think money can be a positive and a negative thing. And I think that made me step back and think. And then I really changed my thought process of, if I'm going to do this, then I'd much rather get into bed with the right people rather
Mm.
than being stuck with something where maybe they're making more demands and saying, look, we could be more profitable if you did virgin products, and it's not such a bad thing, and all that. And it's not what I'm here to do. I didn't start this to do that whole, that they might compromise maybe a bit on safety because money's more important, for example, and
Yeah,
profit over the ethics side of things.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I think nowadays people are becoming more aware of the ethics side of it, and people just want to look after the world. I mean, it's yeah, what water companies are doing at the moment is just disgraceful, and I think people the awareness is now there, and people are waking up to the fact that actually people aren't being that ethical. So yeah, I think we're going to see like this new trend of the public wanting to see what actions are being taken by companies to
Yeah.
take a more environmental stance and things. So yeah, I think it's quite timely that you're coming into this.
I feel very privileged to be able to choose to do this in this way. If I was younger, I probably wouldn't be in the financial position of being able to make the slow approach. And so I'm being very cautious on who I work with for that reason. And I think it's just I feel very privileged to be able to do it this way, though.
Absolutely. So when you're introducing something like this, which is completely new, into the construction industry, so builders, and then looking at councils and investors? How do you get them to sort of believe in it and help them understand what this is?
A lot of communication. I think communication's king here. I think it's a very long journey, and I suspect that what I'm doing is I'm here to try just to raise the standard and keep the idea going. But I suspect that it'll be long after I've gone when it'll still be evolving and maybe, things like 3D printing, but we're keeping the standards safe, and I think that's, I'm a firm believer in bioplastics, for example. I think that the crops yields and the ability for us to turn desert lands into the ability to grow a plant that can be used for us to turn into a feedstock. There's so much that can be happening. Like, this is just the beginning, in my opinion. I'm very aware in my mind. I've had a lot of thought process on all of the ways you could do this, how we get it to market, what are the problems, what are the hurdles, and the construction industry. You know what? I think we say that we're very rigid. We don't accept new things, traditional materials. But Grenfell came about because we were very open to accepting polymer claddings, which had a little bit of aluminium coating. So yes, I think we're a lot more burnt, and that's not just the industry; that's everybody. We're seeing, like, it's happening in Spain where there's been cladding fires. So we're a lot more cautious now, and rightly so. I think that should have been right from the get-go. I think we were just, again, money and progress took over a little bit too quickly. I think that we're a little bit more mature as a whole industry, and I think that's been a good thing. But I think that the whole "I'll accept it if it's right" mentality is there. Yeah, it just has to be proven, and I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of taking this slowly, and the critics, I guess you could say, turning them into a supporter would be more of a positive thing, because if your biggest critic says, "Okay, yeah, that's all right, I better let it go,"
Yeah,
then you've done your job right. It's not. I don't want to have people that are just yes men. I want to have people that are, or yes people, but I don't want to have that. I want to have people that actually look at it critically, and we work through the solutions and make sure that this is right.
yeah,
One of my friends said, "Oh, but I don't want to live in a plastic box because the emissions." And I was like, "You know what? That's right." But when you think about, for example, our rooms, I don't know if you look around your room. I'm sitting in a room where I know I've got plastics and I've got textiles which are made from synthetics, for example, and I know that it's emitting all of that. But I also know that the air quality has dropped substantially. It's a real problem, and it's something that don't want to go into too much detail. But I've designed now, and I've got to make it. I just need to do the funding for it. I've designed a ventilation system which will clean the air, and it's like it sits perfectly within my system. People challenging and saying, "I don't want that." I say, sure, we'd have to put windows. We have to seal it into the block nicely with, don't let it get past the cement board, for example. But there are other things. You can even raise the bar higher. And I like the idea of it being raised. I like the idea of my bedroom having absolutely no mold growing in the corner behind the cabinet because the
yeah,
air doesn't move, or
yeah,
that I'm breathing dust because so I like the idea of raising the bar, and I'm always trying to look at how to do that. And yeah, I think the challenges are great, and I think the communication should be something that we look to innovate and to fix, not just say, "Well, that's good enough. I'm making a bit of coin. Back on." That's not my goal.
yeah. What's next for you with StrucLock then, over the next sort of year or two? What does success sort of look like in your eyes at the moment?
Okay, for me, I'm looking at making this accessible. And so right now, which we'll see how long this takes, we're looking at making the solution into a containerized solution. So it's trying to get it so that somebody like myself can go in there, be taught how to operate the machinery safely, and it's built in a way that it is safe, and they can produce the different components, and then they can go and take that and build a building with it. And I think it's quite a rewarding um, a rewarding lifestyle, because you could be working with your local waste streams in your community, putting this together, and then going out of bed. Now, I know that's oversimplifying it, because you might need more people, but we're trying to get it so that these containers can build enough houses a year just with one container, that you're making a healthy profit, and that we've got a copy and paste template set up. The goal is to have it so that the containers can just be copied and pasted, and then we go and train up the people in different communities. And over this year, I would like to start building a couple of buildings. First, I'm going to focus on the container, get it so that it does it how I want, at the speeds that I believe it needs to be, so that it makes it more profitable, And the faster we can turn out these blocks, then the more profit that you can, in theory, make. So that's a bit of my focus point at right now. Immediately after that, I'm already talking with people about it. Every time I talk with somebody, they say, you know what, I'd love it if you could X, Y, Z. And so I don't feel like the customers are my issue. Then addressing the regulatory side of things, and that's quite a big cost, getting a BBA, for example, all the independent fire testing. But what I'll do in the short term is I'll actually focus on things like doing garden studios, site accommodation, instead of, and I've had this of being in construction, where I've had to rent in lots of containers and build a massive monstrosity of metal containers, which are my welfare sites and all that. Whereas this actually is an opportunity where you can palletize it all, send it out there, build it all together to make your welfare. And remember, it already is giving you your fire acoustics, thermals, and structural. And then at the end of it, undo it, repalletize it. So it's not a big, huge component. It's something you can shrink it down to pallet size, and then you can go and store it till you need it again. Apply to emergency accommodation, for example. We've got like floods happening, all that. And so we could talk about going into a community, and I'd like to work with governments on that respect, where we get their stock, and then they can just take that truck, drive it to wherever they need to, and bang together some buildings to help communities that are under stress, with the floods, fires, and all the things that Mother Nature's throwing at us right now. So that's kind of stepping away from the planning permission environment. It's not requiring that they're the temporary structures, the garden sheds and studios and things like. And that's a stepping stone for me. I can go out there, I can do that right now. I can just go knock on one of my neighbor's doors, and I'm sure I'll drum up some business. But it proves the worth. It shows how it can be done. I can make videos of me doing it. And, we get out there and we start this. And then I'll keep searching for the funds, as you know why, to help get this regulatory aspect and more independent testing resolved. Yeah. And that might take time. Even if I had the money right now, it can take months and months and months just to go and get that all done. But that's the journey, I'm aware of it, and it's like, and once I unlock those regulatory things, and if I've developed this containerised solution, I've got that nice balance now where I can then start talking with other communities, and it doesn't just have to be here in the UK. It can be anywhere in the world, and
The scope of this is incredible, isn't it? When you really start thinking about it,
yeah, franchising would be the solution, I think. I think that I would have to make sure that people that are using it are controlled, regulated, and governance, so that they don't, we all do it. You shouldn't climb on the chair to change the light bulb, but we do. You should go and get the proper safety equipment. We do. So it's to try and make sure that we don't do it wrong, because then that we do tarnish the whole idea. But also, I want to be leasing the equipment so that we are there as support. I'd like to build that infrastructure where we've got people that come in and repair the machinery that you're leasing, take away that problem. Because, if you said to me as a builder, go and do that, I'd be like, whoa, it's too much.
Yeah.
Whereas if we can come in and partner with them and create that franchise agreement where they can go and get on with what they do, which is building and working with the communities, we take over and say, well, we'll help you feed, and, even introducing them to the right waste streams and things like that, helping building those partnerships. And it's got some real potential for building strong, robust communities.
Johnny, thank you so much for sharing this. It's truly inspiring, and especially for anyone that's wanting to start to build something and build something meaningful. So yeah, thank you for your time today. And